All right, guys, so I'm going to talk about an issue in which I'm going to be very critical of the Republican Party because the libertarians are right, okay? The libertarians are right, and I like to say that every now and then because some people think that conservatives and libertarians are the same, and they're not actually the same, and I think that issues like this clearly highlight the difference between the modern day libertarian and the modern day conservative, who in my opinion is a lot closer to libertarians than they were in the past, but there's still some friction there, okay? Specifically when it comes to things that, you know, traditionally conservatives are like, hey, you know what, I'm not necessarily sure about this, right? Things like drug use, okay? Even though, you know, from a principle standpoint, you should be for people being able to put what they want in their bodies, right? They have their own bodily autonomy. At the same time, there are a lot of negative externalities that society and families have to face from people who use drugs. So trying to bar people from using drugs, making certain drugs illegal makes sense when trying to keep people from hurting and harming themselves. But the libertarians say, hey, you know what? That's not really our concern, right? What people do with their bodies and whether or not they want to harm themselves with whatever drugs they put in their bodies, hey, that's their own personal freedom, okay? Again, I think this is a issue that really is fascinating to talk about and to see the differences of opinions across the aisle. But what we're talking about here is the House, who just passed a bill to decriminalize marijuana, right? Some people saying legalize. I don't really know what the difference would be in this case between legalizing and decriminalizing marijuana, but that is what they're doing. And I want to talk about this because I think Democrats are doing this. They're leading the way on this. And I think this is a desperate attempt to try to kind of get some good publicity, right, from their side of the aisle and to rally some folks before the midterms of 2022. And my fear is that the Republicans, because of outdated thinking, is going to drop the ball on this and allow the Democrats to use this against them when they really should be on board with legalizing marijuana, considering the things that they claim they believe in, right? Like individual freedom, right? But you know, hey, again, there's some people that are still stuck in the old way of thinking. But before I get into that, I want to talk about this and give you guys some more information about what's in this bill and who's for it and who's not. The House on Friday voted to decriminalize cannabis on the federal level and allow for the expungement of some marijuana convictions. Quote, why it matters, the legislation would monumentally reshape U.S. drug policy and the decades-long war on drugs, keeping pace with states across the country that have legalized marijuana. So another provision of this bill that I want you guys to understand, because I think this is important. There's going to be a sales tax, right? A federal sales tax. It is going to be 5%, and it's going to gradually increase to 8%. Now, here's the thing. I don't necessarily think that that's a great idea. And the reason why is because we've seen in some states, like California, for example, you know, when you make the sales tax too high, you're not really doing what the intent is, which is to deter people from going and getting marijuana on the black market, right? What the purpose of legalization is for people not to have to go to the neighborhood drug dealer to buy their, you know, drugs, okay? Because that is what leads to violence, conflict, and all the things that tear down the community that are associated with people selling drugs, right? It empowers gangs, it funds gangs. That's what it does, okay? So when you make the tax too high and people are like, okay, well, if I go to a legal place and get, you know, marijuana or whatever, if the cost is too high because of taxes, then they're not going to be able to compete with the underground market. Now, there's some people that will just go and get it the legal way anyways because, you know, it's just better to go get it legally. You'll just pay the price than for you to go to some sketchy dude, right, to get it and potentially, you know, get your door bust in, get shot, whatever, right, get caught up in something. But that's one thing I don't agree with. And Nancy Mace, who's a Republican, actually has her own legalization bill that would not make the sales tax that high, right, for the exact same reasons, because that sales tax basically kind of defeats the purpose of, you know, legalization when it comes to trying to defund the black market when the sales tax is too high. So I want to make sure you guys understand that that's a provision in the bill as well too. The same bill was passed by the House in 2020, but stalled in the then Republican-controlled Senate. The bill passed the House 222-204. 3 Republicans joined all but 2 Democrats in passing the bill. Representative Matt Gaetz from Florida, Tom McClintock, representative from California, and Brian Mast, representative from Florida. Matt Gaetz has been on the right side of a lot of issues that he don't get a lot of credit for, that, Republicans aren't necessarily really on board with. The details. The Marijuana Opportunity Investment and Expungement More Act would remove marijuana from the list of scheduled substances so that growing, selling, and possessing the drug would not carry criminal penalties. Quote, it would also create a process to expunge nonviolent marijuana convictions and review criminal sentences for offenders. Finally, it would allow the government to offer loans to cannabis businesses and impose a tax on cannabis products, the revenue from which would partly go to programs to assist those adversely impacted by the war on drugs. A Gallup poll in November last year had 68% of Americans supporting full legalization of marijuana, up from 34% in 2001. Democrats and independents overwhelmingly supported it, 83% and 71% respectively, while Republicans were split, 50% in favor and 49% against. Yeah, so that's the gist of the information that I feel like you guys need to know. That most of the American people, overwhelming majority of the American people, support it. And Republicans, for whatever reason, I don't understand why they're still kind of opposed to this, okay, but still running around talking about individual freedoms and rights, right? I don't really get it, right? It doesn't really make sense to me in regards to the things that they claim they stand for. However, I mean, if you think about how, Big Pharma, the prison industrial complex, the alcohol industry, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of big corporate interests that are in the way of legalization, that are opposed to it. I think that probably has a whole lot to do with it. Also combined with kind of outdated thinking. I think those two things in combination is kind of what is probably driving this. But even the most conservative Supreme Court justice, right, Clarence Thomas, okay, who some on the right argue may be the greatest Supreme Court justice ever, even he knows that marijuana being illegal this day and time is silly. It makes no sense, right? Even he's acknowledged that. So I don't really understand the argument anymore coming from Republicans on this, because it is clear, it seems like in the Senate, that they're going to filibuster and that they're not really going to get on board with it, right? There's not going to be enough votes to actually make it legal. And in my opinion, like, why even let the Democrats make this their issue, right? If you are the party of individual liberty and personal responsibility, then why don't you let people have their individual liberties? I don't really understand. You should be the ones championing this, right? Why you let Democrats get a layup? Okay, this is the thing about Republican Party that really bothers me. They let Democrats take layups and the Democrats miss layups. Republicans rarely ever actually try to get their own layups, okay? They rarely ever try to score. They're constantly playing defense with the Democrats when they should be championing stuff like this. They should say, no. We're going to actually get on board with this because we want to be the ones that say, hey, look, we support this as well too. This is not an issue that you should be giving the Democrats credit for because we've been pushing this as well too. But instead, they're going to let an issue like this that an overwhelming majority of people agree that, hey, it's kind of silly to still have this drug be illegal in this country. They're just going to let the Democrats have it. And then the Democrats can say, oh, well, Republicans are blocking you guys from your individual liberties and rights, right? And again, I just... in my opinion, I don't understand. There's a certain class of conservatives and Republicans that will come out here and will drink on camera alcohol, a drug that, in my opinion, is objectively more destructive than marijuana. And they'll do it on camera and they'll drink at the same time telling people, hey, I think people should be locked in cages for smoking a blunt. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't understand how you can do that. Okay, and then the arguments they make for why they think that marijuana should remain illegal are silly as well too. It's like, well, I just don't like it. I just don't think people should be running around in our society high all the time. Okay, we already have a drug problem. We shouldn't be introducing more drugs and making the problem worse. And I'm like, no, you simply don't really understand this issue. People who use marijuana or that want to use marijuana are going to use it regardless of whether or not it's illegal. The thing is that should we lock people in cages for putting a drug in their body that really only harms themselves and doesn't really harm anybody else? If they want to sit around and be high all the time and not do anything, that's on them. But I don't think you can characterize most people who use marijuana as just potheads who don't really do anything with their life. Obviously, there's a lot of potheads out there that don't do anything in their lives, that are strung out on the drug. But again, are you for individual liberties or not? I'm just saying, this issue in the opposition from some conservatives and Republicans, it makes no sense to me. I don't understand in what world is it that a vast majority of the Republican representatives in the House are saying no to legalization of marijuana while at the same time stomping for freedom, right? Talking about freedom. I don't understand. Okay, because the same arguments these people use about how, well, I just don't want it legalized because it's harmful. It's the same exact argument that the Democrats use when it comes to justifying all the mandates, all the restrictions that the Democrats tried to impose on us during the pandemic. Okay, because their argument was that, well, you shouldn't be allowed to do this, or that you must be forced to do this because it might be harmful, right? That's literally what the argument is. We're the government and we're here to look out for your health. We're here to tell you what you must do to best protect yourself, okay? And that you don't get the ability to decide. That's the same exact thing that Republicans and conservatives that oppose marijuana are saying. Hey, we're the government, right? And we're here to tell you that you can't use this drug because it's harmful, okay? And you guys all know there was a certain drug, right, during this pandemic that Democrats and the mainstream liberal media was basically smearing and telling people that, hey, you can't use that. It's harmful, blah, 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 right? And Republicans and conservatives push back against that and say, hey, no, that's anti-science, anti-freedom, anti-individual liberty. That's literally what the argument was. You guys know what I'm talking about. So I'm just saying, like, look, I think that this is an issue right here that Republicans are really dropping the ball on. They have all the momentum in the world right now, and you're going to give up the momentum letting Democrats make something like this an issue that Republicans should get on board with, because one, you just saw in the base, 50% of the party supports it being legal. Okay, and two, the party needs to get younger, and a vast majority of younger people agree with this. Okay, Republicans got to start to try to get younger, get more young people on board with the movement. Okay, this is one of those issues that it just makes sense from the perspective of what Republicans and conservatives claim that they're for, to get behind and say, hey, you know what, we really mean it when we talk about individual freedoms and having those rights and not having the government impose on that, right? So, hey, nobody can ever come up here and say I don't criticize Republicans, because I definitely do on issues where I don't agree with them on. And this is one of those issues where I think they're definitely on the wrong side. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.